fatherhood isn't about you, but it starts with you, and you're good enough.
Dory 1, this is Fire Team Delta. Dad's coming home.
Welcome to the Military Veteran Dad Podcast, where it is our mission to bring every dad home. I am your host, Ben Cloy. I'm a United States Marine veteran, husband, and a father. We will bring authentic conversations to inspire action in your life so we can close the gap between the dad you are today and the dad you want to be tomorrow. This is the Military Veteran Dad Podcast. Welcome back to Military Veteran Dad, episode 83. Guys, we are halfway through July now. Can you believe it? I cannot believe it. Although it happens every year. It's kind of like this denial that most parents go through that, oh my gosh, we're almost a month and a half away from getting back into the hustle and bustle of school starting. Now that could be even a month away for you, depending on where you are in the United States. Here in Wisconsin, schools don't start till after Labor Day. But today's episode with Andy Riise is a topic that I've been waiting ever since I recorded it in the spring to get you this episode, because we talk about an area that most men resonate with, but we don't actually identify with the similarities that we have in our life, and that is this professional sports industry. Andy Riise is an amazing guy, a 20-year U.S. Army veteran. Andy Riise just brings a huge amount of value into the conversation, and that value just opens up so many different conversations of the parallels between professional sports and being a veteran, transitioning, being active duty, how we find teams, how we build teams, how we build camaraderie. So many different layers of this conversation are going to hit home for you, especially if you like sports, because this brings so many different analogies of what professional sports go through and what veterans go through. So without further ado, let's get started with Andy Riise, and I will talk to you on the other side. Welcome to the podcast, Andy.
Hey, Ben, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
The preparatory for what this interview is going to go into is going to be next level in a way that we've had a few guests go into it, but I believe you're going to crack a few caverns open that most people have like a centimeter wide. It's going to be at least 12 inches wide by the time we get done talking with this interview here. So Andy, go ahead and a little bit tell us about your background, what your time in the service was, what your specialty is, and a little bit about your family and what you're up to right now.
I'm originally from Northern California, small town, was recruited to play football at West Point. Went to West Point, played football all 4 years. That's when I discovered one of my passions later on in my career, which is sport and performance psychology. And I was kind of in my own way, like a lot of people who find psychology and how do I find knowledge and skills, that can make me better at what I do on the football field. That became part of who I was as an Army officer. And shortly after 9/11, shortly after I was commissioned in 2001 as an Army officer, as a field artillery officer, 9/11 happened, and that obviously changed the way that we looked at readiness and preparing for combat. Deployed 2003. By the time you were in the Marine Corps, Ben, and over in Okinawa, and then I cut my teeth as a platoon leader. And I've had a whole bunch of jobs, but I eventually went back to West Point. I taught psychology there in the Center for Enhanced Performance. Really found my love for teaching and for coaching and mentoring. That was about the time when the Army's resiliency program was coming on board, and I was working with the University of Pennsylvania to develop the Army's resiliency training program, and then the holistic approach to fitness, which I think is relevant to how do you develop as a father and as a leader and as a human being. And then I went into special operations. I spent 5 years with 2 special forces groups as you recognize as a joint terminal attack controller. I'm a Marine Corps TAC P by training. I loved working with Green Berets, jumping out of perfectly good airplanes and helping them put warheads on foreheads in Afghanistan, South America, and Eastern Europe, and of course in the Middle East. And they were really invested in developing the tactical athlete from a holistic standpoint. So I was working not only as a fire support officer, but also helping to develop their human performance programs. And I did that as both a practitioner and at the programmatic level, and then eventually went taught at the Air Force Academy before my last gig right now, which is at the Maneuver Center of Excellence. Everything's a center of excellence, right? There's no centers of mediocrity in the military, at least they say. Here at Fort Benning, Georgia. Personally, so I'm a dad. I'm proud to be a dad. Proud father of 4 kids. So Larson is my oldest son. He's 14. Jonah is 12. Caleb is 10. Hannah is 8. And so we have we're a big military family. And we're excited to be, closing this chapter in our lives as an Army family and moving to Texas, to north of the Houston area. And next, I figure out as part of my transition that who I am as a coach. And I love to help people and teams get better at what they do. And obviously my expertise is in optimal human performance and resilience from the psychological side of things. And so I'll be working on coaching development. So I'm working with the Colorado Rockies Major League Baseball team as a mental performance coach, which is awesome. Despite, our season being on hold, getting to know the players and coaches and helping them fight through this difficult time has been a lot of fun. Hopefully we'll have a season here starting on July 4th at the Major League level. Cross our fingers. All dads love baseball, right? And so especially taking your kids to a ball game, and I can't wait to do that. And then I'm also teaching at Texas A&M University, where I'm teaching at the undergrad level, and I'm helping develop the coaching academy, not only in terms of their outreach with coaches in practice, but I'm also doing a really cool program for a lot of the veteran dads out there who are maybe interested in coaching. Is called the Veterans Coaching Program, in which we can talk about more. But I'm looking forward to spending a lot more time with my family, doing the things that I'm passionate about, and just following my passion and purpose in life.
Well, that is definitely quite the story there. I loved every minute of it. And it's one that has lots of depth, and it has ones with lots of trials and tribulations and learning about yourself. When you said you had 4 kids, I had one question. And because you said you love being a dad now, what was it like when you first had your first kid becoming a dad? Was it always like something that you embraced, or was it something that initially scared the hell out of you?
Yeah, something I wanted to do, and that's because I had, I'm lucky. I have an awesome dad, Don Riise. He's probably going to be watching this. Shout out to my dad, Don, back in Oakdale, California. My dad didn't have a good father, and so he's a self-made man when it comes to fatherhood, and really set the mold for what I wanted to be as a dad. And that's really difficult to do while you're in the Army, let alone you spend your whole career at war, and they're at odds with each other. I think 2005 when I had Larson, it was I was scared for sure, but I was super excited about being a father and starting that journey that my dad started with me, and replicating that, and then trying to take it, like almost level it up. Like I think my dad just really leveled up compared to his father and his father's father. And to me, to carry on that tradition of fatherhood and level up, but while doing it while I was a soldier was something I was really committed to. And then my wife is, just amazing too. And, she was a successful architect in Houston and decided to unless she was going to go design Circle K's and Walmarts and the awesome places that the Army and the Marine Corps send us, she was like, hey, I'm going to be a mom. And it's very rare that you want somebody who's committed to doing that as a working professional. And you could appreciate that. But I think we just were all in on parenthood, and figuring that out. And of course, you suck at it. I mean, you suck at being a dad. You don't know what the hell you're doing. And of course, my oldest son, Larson, was not the easiest kid. And I hope he's watching this too. But it definitely got a lot easier after Larson.
And it's something that people don't often acknowledge, that if fatherhood is supposed to be something that you see as beautiful as the catalog with all the baby crap that you're supposed to be buying and all of these quiet moments and everything is kumbaya. But a lot of it is chaos and a lot of it is beautiful. But embracing the chaos, understanding that every dad, there's 1,000 dads, millions of dads every day that enter the first day they've ever done this day. And you just got to be kind of humble to that experience and just know that every dad before you has survived. And none of the feelings that you're feeling are permanent. I think that's something else I used to get trapped up in myself, that this season, this feeling of no sleep is something that'll just be permanent. It's never going to change, that you just crave that time. I just wish I could go outside and play catch with my son, but he's still 6 months and you don't think that's ever going to come. But we don't really embrace the reality of consistent change with being a dad. Every season has its lows and its highs. And when they're 5, there's seasons when they were 6 months old that I miss, even though when I was at 6 months old, I was craving for the season of 5. And it's often that duality that can really kind of almost deflate us, because we don't get really happy with whatever season we've got. We've always wanted something different than what we've got. But once it's gone, it's gone. You never get it back. And that's something that a lot of dads don't embrace well enough.
No, you're right. I think that if I was to look at my younger self, and like you said, it's enjoying, it's the mindfulness approach to where it's enjoying, embracing the moment for what it's worth, good, bad, or indifferent. right? And that is really a way of thinking deliberately in effective ways. And I think you just don't appreciate that, until you're actually in it, or like you said, when it's gone. That's the recency effect. There's a psychological term to that. But like, I remember especially the struggles, right? Because like you just want your kid to go to sleep. And I remember like, just bouncing my kid around, Larson around the house. And like, he was a colicky baby. He did not want to go to sleep. And he was so sensitive to getting him down. I just remember just getting so frustrated, and like, why won't he just go to sleep and stay asleep? And then, but then I remember, I look back and I remember finally getting him to sleep and sleeping on my chest, and my son fitting on my chest while I'm, easing into the couch, trying to like not wake him up, and then falling asleep with him on my chest on the couch. I mean, I cherish those moments, and I couldn't wait till like his neck was stable enough. I was training for a marathon, right? And my favorite moments were, my son loved to go. I run all over Fort Sill, Oklahoma, on the back 40 there, and I put him in his jogger. Man, we put so many damn miles on that jogger, my son and I just would love. And I would, and you're out in the middle of the country, and you get in you're kind of coasting along if you've been on a jogger. And I remember kind of put him in coast mode, and I got the leash on, and I could walk it to where I could watch his face, and see how much he enjoyed it. And he would do this thing where he would like rock forward, like he's trying to increase the momentum of me jogging with him. And I just appreciate those moments now. I know I appreciated them then, but I think that my ability to savor those moments definitely increased as you had more kids, because you get the chance to do a repeat. You get to do a do-over, right?
Yeah. Like even my third kid, my youngest daughter, like I have been different, because when I had my first, I was trying to go to school at the same time. I was going at nights, and I wasn't as present as I wish I was. And so every time is just an iteration to do better. And it's not maybe the perfect analogy, but I've been using this quite often, that my kids love building stuff with Legos, and it'll often break. And growing up with Legos in my own, I kind of embraced this philosophy that an opportunity when Legos break is just an opportunity to rebuild it better. So every time you mess up, that just gives you a better opportunity the next time, either with the next kid or maybe the next day, just to rebuild it better and get stronger with it.
That's right. And actually that, for your listeners out there, that's actually called the growth mindset, and you probably heard of it.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. Carol Dweck at Stanford University came up with it. And it's like, hey, it's not about what happens to you, and a mindset is a pattern of thinking. Right. And so, that's either both conscious and unconscious. Right. But if you can see every opportunity that you have as an ability to be able to get better, specifically 1% better, if you've read James Clear's book about atomic habits, 1% is very palatable, right? I think anybody can do
1%.
Anybody do 1%, right? And it's those power of those tiny gains, knowing that you're gonna screw stuff up, and like you said, it's trial and error, right? And is that but as long as you're trying to move the needle through every experience that you had as a father, and it's your most important mission and job that you have in life, then I think that's really what matters. And stop being so damn hard on yourself.
Yeah, that's something we were talking about before the podcast started, that because the military desires perfection with our maneuvering, our drill, our precision in executing our weapon, the rehearsing of it to make sure that procedure happens in an execution level that's near flawless. We apply that to our life as a dad, and there's no even close to similarity. Like, it is just a thing that you figure out every day, and you just figure out how to do a little bit better every day. And if you didn't get it today, then tomorrow is a new day. And forgiveness with your kids is always something you can ask. And it's a good example of humility and all of that. I want to go maybe a little bit forward or backward before we go forward.
Sure. Yeah.
What brought you to the Army? Like, as a person, what were you looking for to fill up inside yourself? Maybe you were trying to fit some mold, or maybe you follow your father's footsteps, or what was that calling for?
Yeah. I mean, it was, mainly through inspiration through my sister and my brother-in-law. I do have a family tradition of serving in the Army specifically. My dad was in the Guard. His father was in the Army during World War II. And so on my mom's side, we have some Navy in there that I'll deny, at all costs, especially with me being an Army football player. And so I don't recognize the Navy side of the family. I'm kidding. But for me, my brother-in-law was killed 1994 when I was a sophomore in high school. He was a Army captain. My sister was also in the Army. She was a big inspiration for me. They were both in Desert Storm at the time that I was in middle school. So I really looked up to them. I really looked up to Chris a lot. When he died, just really rocked my family's world. And he just was such an inspiration to me in a lot of different ways, and someone that I wanted to be like early on. He definitely was a hero of mine. And so I kind of, when he, ironically, when it's funny how when bad things happen, they can create these opportunities you never foresaw. And so, here I am. I grew up on the West Coast. You don't know what West Point is. And opposite West Point's in New York. And it's there's a lot of Navy and Air Force in the West Coast. And I didn't know what West Point was or the military academies. I remember Chris, before he died, when I last saw him, had asked me if he went to UC Santa Barbara and was commissioned via ROTC. But he'd served all these guys and went to West Point. One particular guy played football. His name's Brother Ratliff. And other guys who went to West Point. And so when they came back to visit my sister after he died, I developed these relationships, and these guys ended up being great mentors and encouraging me to apply to go to West Point. And by the time that I started having a successful football career, they helped get me recruited, which was a perfect fit for me because I was a fullback in what's called the wing T, which is a great fit for the triple option. I wasn't highly recruited, and so it just was a great things just really worked out, and I developed this affinity for leadership, obviously, and I love being outdoors. I mean, I grew up with the backpack on my back in the outdoors and being a Boy Scout and Eagle Scout. And so all those worlds kind of seemed to come together and make sense to go to West Point and go. And then I think just me loving athletics and in the Army, I think what I found is that the Army, after my football playing days, the Army was the ultimate team sport, And I found a lot of the similarities that I love, the things that I loved about playing football were the same things that I loved about being in the Army, And so that's really kind of what this unexpected journey has turned into. And I never planned on making it a 20-year career, but it's just something that has worked out, and just took it one step at a time. When I was talking about my bio, when I was a sophomore at West Point. Like I said, I was a fullback. I played offense. They switched positions. And so here I am. I'm competing at the highest level, Division 1A in college football, and I've got to make this change to not only the other side of the ball. I had to learn a new position, the defensive scheme. And, oh, by the way, I'm getting my ass kicked in all lives of the academy, right? Because, you're getting this Ivy League education, and you get all your military requirements. You're taking 2 to 3 times more credit hours than the average person. College football is a full-time job. It literally is. It's a business. And it just was, I just was struggling. I was drowning in life. And there's a center called the Center for Enhanced Performance. It's unique. A lot of your listeners who, obviously will notice that a university has a student support center. This is a unique student support center where they took the evidence-based best practices of sport and performance psychology, and they brought it to all 3 legs of the academy, which is athletics, obviously, the military, and academics. And so I leveraged them for all 3. And just to get out of my own head. I mean, I lacked in confidence. I was overthinking things too much. And so I was choking a lot. I was, having a hard time just managing stress and, my attention, and having a hard time just with confidence, composure, concentration were the 3 things that I was really struggling with. And I ended up working with this. He was an Army officer. He was a captain at the time, had his master's degree. And we worked one-on-one, and he started providing me these very simple tools that I could put into practice. Over time, they became a part of who I was. And ironically, that captain later got his PhD and brought me back 10 years later to come teach in that department. So it just is kind of funny how it worked out.
That is a full circle story there. Can you share a story where that where that resilience training really kind of shifted your focus and what that looked like?
I'm one of those type of people. I think like a lot of folks who are veterans, it's the Superman effect, right? Where you're trying to be everything to everyone, just because you have a high motor and a lot of energy. And some people say it's an A-type personality. There's really no such thing. But it just because you have a lot of bandwidth and energy and ability doesn't mean that, you can and should try to do everything. And I'm a pleaser by nature. And so I think I was about the time when I was going through a really grind period in my career, no officer ever wants to be a major, because your major years are thankless. You're doing thankless jobs, climbing the ladder, working long hours. And I was doing that. I was at Joint Base Lewis McChord, the artist formerly known as Fort Lewis, to our old school folks out there in Washington. I'm in this grind period, and you're living in Washington State. I'm in a small house. I have 4 kids under the age of 10. We don't know anybody. We're kind of socially isolated, living off post, and it's in a weird kind of area. People aren't really friendly in Washington. Sorry, Washingtonians, but you generally are not compared to other places we've been. I'm married to a Southern girl who's used to Southern hospitality. People are indoors a lot, and just was. And I'm gone. I'm like, I was just really working a lot of long hours to the point where my kids, I was not seeing my kids during the week, Ben. I mean, I literally, there would be weeks I would go where I was not seeing my kids. And I just was trying to do too much. At the time I was, in order to stay relevant in my field, I was trying to do side hustle type stuff. I was helping out with a veteran nonprofit in the Green Beret Foundation. They were trying to stand up their resilience program called the Next Ridgeline. And I was helping out with that as a volunteer. I'm like moonlighting with the Mariners, trying to help out with them, I'm trying to eventually set myself up for success to work with in sports psychology as a professional later on. And so I just was saying yes to everything. And it was that classic thing where I was, trying to be everything to everyone and ended up being nothing to no one. I remember my wife was just looking at me and I was burnt out. I was starting to get out of shape. I was stressed out. I was stretched thin. My kids hadn't seen me in a long time. Oh, by the way, I'm getting my master's degree online. And so it's like, I'm burning the candle from both ends. And if you're out there, you can relate to this. I mean, and we do this to ourselves. And sometimes we don't realize, we don't gain self-awareness until, one, we hit rock bottom, something really bad happens, or two, like someone actually holds the mirror up to your face and says, hey, jackass, you're not freaking, you're screwing this up. And then my wife, thank God I did that. And our wives are always really good about reminding us, about our faults and where we need to get better. Right. And all relationships are good that way if they're healthy. And so she did that. She held the mirror to my face and be like, what are you doing? Just looking at me. And I just remember, having this aha moment, to where it's sinking in about that, how overextended I was. And then I just kind of went back to the fundamentals of what, I had been teaching, and trying to really, in terms of managing my energy.
You talk about so many different angles there that we overwhelm. We think we can do it all. We put on the Herculean type mindset, or we use our ego to really protect ourselves from anybody else figuring out what your wife reflected back to you. And we think we're hiding it well, but really we just don't have someone coming into our life and saying like, dude, what the F's going on? Because it's not, and we think we've got it, but we don't. And that's the part that is kind of a military kind of basic dad, that we try to project that we have everything figured out, that we have our emotions in order, we have a good family. Because when we're at work, we don't talk about family. So it's very easy for everybody to just assume like, oh yeah, he probably goes home to a great family. And we don't have that integration. We get to hide a lot of our core self. We don't get to embrace our best self as a dad. Like, being a dad helps all the other areas come out stronger. And that is something that so many dads don't embrace. And I can see it in your story of how you had to kind of hit rock bottom in order to come back up from that.
And, it was one of those deals where I've had to learn, and again, it's a trial and error thing, right? I have had to learn how to come up with criteria about like, if, in terms of what my priorities are. Like, there's Stephen Covey has a great analogy in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he talks about, when you're setting goals, about, you look at your goal plan as the jar, right? And if the big rocks are the things that are the most important things in life, and you got to put those things in first, right? And to me, those big rocks were my faith and, and my family, and obviously what pays the bills, my profession that goes in there too. So my faith, my family, my friendships, or fellowship is what I call it, and my profession, right? Those big rocks take priority over everything else too. And then everything else, you have to identify what are the pebbles, what are the sand, what's the water that you can then fill up around it that should support what those priorities are. And I think part of your criteria of developing, filling up your goal plan, making your goal plan and your jar, is understanding it. If it's not a hell yes, then it's a no. And not only is it a no, but how do you say no to people? Especially if you're like me and you're like a pleaser, and you have a demand for your attention and your energy, which are your most precious resources, by the way. A lot of people think it's time, but there's only that's a finite resource, but your time and your energy are within your control, right? And so getting really good about that and treating them like resources, to where it's like, is it contributing to what my goal plan is and supporting those big rocks, or is it taking away from that? And I think understanding that is super important to determining what's worthy of your precious time and energy.
And you hit another great point there, because I was a people pleaser, still am a little bit, but I've moved past it. But the idea that there's an infinite amount of yeses, and the worst part is your brain can't keep track of all the things that you've done. And because we generally don't have good habit practices with time management, of having things in our calendar, scheduling our to-do list, everything seems possible in the moment because your brain just kind of forgets it until you need to do it. And someone walks into your office at work and says, hey, can you do this real quick? And you had all these other things you're supposed to get done. But in that moment, it seems like, yeah, I can do that. I want to be a good friend to you. I don't want to screw you over. And you say yes. And what you also don't realize is probably he mismanaged his time and he's trying to get you to bail out, or you think this is going to hurt the relationship. But then the other side, when you learn to say no, you also realize that it's okay. Like he's like, yeah, that's okay. I'll try to get it done myself or something. Like it's never as devastating to say no as you tell yourself in your head. And that can be such a crux of a crap to get stuck into, because you don't see a great way out of there. And go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, I think there's a couple of reasons why. One is fear of missing out, or FOMO is what we're calling it. It's fear of disappointing people as well too. I mean, let's just to kind of dissect those two things right there. I mean, and I think it's okay to just take a pause and say, hey, that sounds great. Let me get back to you. And I think by you creating that headspace and timing, you can appreciate that, is that you're creating an opportunity for you to reevaluate about where this ask fits into the greater scheme of my purpose, my priorities, and the other piece is like understanding how that it relates to your values, right?
Let's go to a moment in a particular time. So there's probably a moment where you hit rock bottom and you're still very overwhelmed. And I've been to rock bottom. I know what it looks like. And many dads visit it often several times before they figure out how to get out of hitting rock bottom. What moment and what was your moment like where you figured out that you could actually move out of rock bottom? Because it doesn't happen in the same moment. Just because you hit rock bottom doesn't mean you find the door. So what was it like when you actually felt like I've got a path to a better place?
Yeah, I think, recently, right before it was the time when I, had an indicator, or a trigger that happened in terms of that led me to a decision where things to be in line with my priorities and what's important, and then make a decision to throttle down or back off and not do something because it was out of alignment. That the example of that is, so I'm on a fellowship right now through Special Operations Command over the next 9 months. And so right before COVID hit, like really hit hard in early March, I just finished my time in the Army. I was shifting to these new opportunities, and I was getting ready to go to spring training in Arizona to meet up with the Rockies and meet a lot of the coaching staff and the players that were there. They were there at the time. They'd been there for a month. And, but meanwhile, COVID was starting to kind of really really start to affect life, and specifically professional sports. Like there was a couple things that dominoes were starting to fall into place. Like the NCAA tournament had just started to end. They just ended that. So they canceled the rest of the season for men's college basketball. They had, and so now we were wondering whether or not that was going to affect spring training. So my good friend of mine, Doug Chadwick, I called him, but the night before that I called him I was getting ready to get on the plane and the night before I remember, of course the kids are still going to school this time. And my youngest daughter, Hannah, the kids are starting to ask about, they're hearing about coronavirus. There's a lot of chatter in the infield, obviously people dying. Kids are smart. They're hearing about it too. And I remember, and they knew I was getting ready to get on the plane, right? But I didn't have to because the travel ban hadn't gone into effect yet. I remember putting my daughter to bed, right? And I remember, like I do every night, and we're getting ready to say prayers on this thing, and she's crying, and I'm like, Hannah, what's wrong? And she's like, Daddy, I don't want you to, get on the plane. I don't want you to go and get coronavirus and die. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I'm just kind of like, honestly, Ben, it felt like a deployment. It felt like that old familiar feeling that of you're getting ready to go on a jet plane and you don't know if you're going to come back, but yet I'm not going to a combat zone. The Army wasn't sending me. This is a totally volunteer moment. I don't have to go. This is a nice have, not a need to have, And I remember going in after I put the kids to bed, and I sat down in the bed next to my wife, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I'm like, this is asinine. I'm like, I need to call Doug, and Doug is a great friend. And I need to call Doug tomorrow and tell him I'm not coming. And, as fate would turn out, I talked to him, and he's like, hey, look, man, I think we're making the right call. Spring training isn't canceled yet, but I don't want you to get stuck out here. I've been out here for a month. I don't know if I'm going to get home. Let's just call it off. And sure as shit, that night they canceled spring training, and now here we are, And so it just reassured me that sometimes you got to listen to your gut, and what your kids are telling you. As a dad, you have to listen to what your kids are telling you and listen to what your heart and your mind is telling you, and to inform you to make good decisions that are aligned with your purpose and your priorities.
And just because you made a decision doesn't mean you need to keep that decision. Oftentimes I feel we overcommit to our commitment, and it's kind of like a hell or no hell way of like, we're going down this road no matter what. Even if it's a dead end, I need to go down this and prove that I was at least half right. And we can pull back at any moment. We can course correct. And I use it like in my life, every day is a crazy kind of chaotic, because I've never been a stay-at-home dad my entire life. Every day is a new day that I've never done anything remotely close to what I've done. And like for the first 3 or 4 weeks after I lost my job, it was chaotic, stressful, but every day was just a new opportunity to let something go from the previous day, try something new, and just keep reiterating, but not getting so caught up in the process of it's got to look a certain way, it's got to go this way, and then take feedback. Or something else that I also learned through the stay-at-home dad process is you're not the only freaking guy that's been doing this. There's stay-at-home dads all over that their wives are the ones that go out into the workplace and they stay home and take care of. It's like, once I found them, I was like, oh my gosh, I got this whole network now that I don't have to crowdsource my own ideas of myself. I can help shortcut my learning. And that's something we also suck at as a dad. We don't reach out for help. We always internalize that we are the only ones having this problem. I got a question that I was thinking about as you were talking about the Rockies and your sports, and also in the Army. So most men idolize sports, football, baseball, as something that's almost religious for most men. What is something that you can see that is very similar to someone playing professional sports that a military dad already has but doesn't know he can activate it? Because I imagine there are massive similarities, but because we put professional sport players on a pedestal, we don't think we have that same level of resilience, mindset, and just sheer effort to kick ass. But inside, if we really believed it's there, I believe we have a lot of similarities. So I'm wondering what you see comparing like what we see, what we have, and that professional sports player just figured out how to unlock it.
Yeah, I know. I think that the number one thing that jumps out to me is the competitive mindset, right? And what that means to compete. And to me, like when working with elite tactical athletes, working with elite sports athletes, working with leaders in business, the people who are really successful at their craft or what they do have this competitiveness. I know a lot of your viewers are probably watching The Last Dance, and the ultimate competitor is Michael Jordan, right? And you're seeing the benefits of that, but there's a cost to that too. But I define competition, as the process of continual improvement, starting with yourself to make yourself the best possible performer that you can, in a way that's, holistic, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, those, and then professionally, right? I think, looking at those areas and knowing that you're never going to are fully arrived, you embrace the process of continual improvement. And through that process of you becoming the best version of yourself, you're going to automatically influence others, right? You can only control yourself, how you think and how you act and react. We know that. But, how do you influence people beyond yourself is by becoming the best version of yourself in those areas. And then you will eventually influence others that are, especially the ones that are closest to you. It becomes a byproduct of that too. It will come out of you naturally, right? And I think that, really good military leaders, athletes, really good athletes, they compete, at everything, so they compete at their craft as a baseball player, their craft as a coach, their craft as a military officer or an enlisted member, an NCO. And, but sometimes people forget about taking that competitive mindset, that pattern of thinking, and applying that to being a dad. Like, I'm going to compete my ass off to be the best dad that I can today, knowing that I may fail. I may screw it up. But if I'm getting 1% better at being a dad, even though I failed, I've learned something that made me better. That's going to move the needle, right? Over time, you're going to be a way better dad, over a number of years than you were than when you started, right? But the competition piece is huge, and I think the next piece is the tribe. You hit on it earlier, right? The best athletes know that they can't do it themselves, right? It takes a team, it takes a village, it takes a family. That it's not just a nuclear family. It takes, there are other people who've done this long before you have. There's a lot of other experts that are out there, and so who are you surrounding yourself with that is helping you to become that best version of yourself as a father, right? So I would say those two things, competition, specifically competitive mindset, and tribe.
Those two were beautiful. And I could put a cherry on the competitive one that I've really, so the part that we are living in today in 2020 is the comparative trap, that everybody has a better life on Facebook and Instagram than you do now. And you desire that. And that difference in that gap internally makes you feel like shit. And that continually repeats. And that muscle getting stronger just makes you feel worse and worse. And very often we always compare our beginning to someone else's end. Like, someone listening to this might think that, man, I wish Ben's such a great dad. He's so far up ahead of me. But don't compare my end to where you're beginning, because I was at the exact same spot that you were. I just decided to start a podcast to help people come up behind me, because I wanted to know that there was other dads out there that were on the same struggle, that had the same problems. And when you think of the competition, the perfect way to explain the comparative, only person you should be competing and comparing yourself is the guy that you were yesterday, not your neighbor, not someone else, yourself. How do you compare to yesterday? Are you better? Did you figure out, improve on something? Like, that is what you're talking about with that 1%. Compare yourself to yesterday. And that's the only person that should be comparing, because everybody else has their own shit. And that's what nobody really talks about. And like, you can see the one version, but everybody has some, even people that make $1 million. And Jim Carrey, I saw a quote from him recently that said, like, I wish everybody could just make $10 million and realize that it doesn't make everything go away. Because they all have their own problems.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I think that's what competition is not, is that the traditional way of thinking is that competition is you versus me, and I think social media just enhances that lens a little bit too. But if you choose to see competition as, like you said, is that I'm better than yesterday, that I beat yesterday, then you're doing it right. And I think that's what you can control. And then the things you can't control, you let it go, because it's not worth your precious time and energy.
No, you can only control yourself. And even if there's like things like, whether it be between a marriage or a relationship with your kids, no matter what happens, like if there's an outcome and you're like, there's no way I can fix this, it really pissed me off, whatever happened, there's only two good questions if you want to focus on control. What did I do today that led up to this moment happening? So like, try to diagnose, like, did I do something earlier that kind of like set this motion? And then what could I have done to actually prevent it from happening? Like, was there something that I could control that would have prevented this moment? And you can just remove the whatever happened from the situation. And again, just focus on how can I make myself 1% better tomorrow? And there was another thing that I also hear with Tom Brady is a good example. Like, you could think Tom Brady being a perfect football player, perfect quarterback, he's got it all together and he can do it all on his own. But what you don't realize, especially in football, and I don't know what the actual ratio to coaches is in baseball, but in football, I know it's really high. There's a coach specialty for every single thing within football. No quarterback knows how to do it himself. No one masters all the offense. No one masters all the defense. Everyone has like 15 different coaches in their life because they can't know it all. So they go to the people that do to enhance their own life, whether it be money, whether it be relationships, whether it be a dad, whether it be your career. There is a coach for everything. And the military mindset says that because you don't ask for help, then that all of that gets closed off. But literally, to change your life, there is someone out there that can move it forward. In whatever category you feel like you need the help, there's always someone ahead of you. You just need to find someone that's got enough advice that can help you pull you where you want to be. And we suck at that, but it's one of the core fundamentals of how performance is improved in sports. Like, you literally have coaches around you, and oftentimes the average of the 5 closest coaches is the average of your performance.
That's right. You're absolutely correct too. And I think we don't think about that when it comes to fatherhood, is that who's my Mount Rushmore or my You can look up the idea about having an personal advisory board when it comes to, someone on your personal advisory board should be somebody who's maybe advising you, who you really look up to as a father, and talk you through that. Because I would say that is arguably your most important performance in life is being a father. Nobody dies, sits on their deathbed wishing that they were, they were a better soldier or Marine or, a better businessman. It's all about the people who are there with you, and so I think you got to invest in that early and often.
And you also hit on something that military dads and performers have in common in a negative way. We both prioritize the wrong thing, that we idolize our position on the field, and our entire identity comes from that uniform we put on, whether it be a sports uniform or whether we put it on as a military uniform. It becomes who we are. It becomes everything we are. And we idolize who we are when we put that on. But we never really idolize who we are without it, and acknowledge the people that idolize just for being you. And that part is so important because you need to recognize that priority is not there. There's a reason at the bottom of my logo I added legacy, because many military dads get stuck in, what did my service mean? Why did that person die and I live? What did those 4 years or those 2 years that I had to go to Iraq, what did all that mean? Like, it's all garbage. Same thing with sports. Like, whether you played with the Buffalo Bills in 1985 and won a Super Bowl, no one's going to remember that. But the kids are going to remember of how you showed up in their life for the rest of their life. And that's the stuff that's going to carry on well past. Like, you may be remembered for that one kick that missed the field goal, but you're going to be remembered for all the successes after that. And your legacy of your family, that switch of making it from service to your family, is something that the sports guys often suck at, which is why they always end up in a lot of cases in trouble or in the news for doing family in a wrong way or getting a divorce and getting removed from their kid's life. It's because they prioritize the wrong position.
You're spot on. And I think what's cool about that is to be a part of organizations that are bringing those worlds together, like athletes and veterans, because we have similarities. Merging in veterans and players is one of them. Soldiers to sidelines is another one. And obviously Texas A&M Coaching Academy, we're working with that. But everybody goes through transitions in life, and I'm doing that right now. And it's really difficult. So it's very stressful. I'm definitely feeling the stress of transition right now. And I think one of the most important things that I've done is, and I'm still working through that, is when you go through a transition as a veteran, and you could appreciate this, Ben, is that the first thing you think about is, where am I going to go and what am I going to do? But you don't take time to think about, who am I? What's my identity? What is what's my purpose? Why do I do what I do? What are my core values and beliefs? And then how do those things, that's like building the foundation of the house, right? So we rush to framing out the house, putting a roof and decorating the house, but we don't have a strong foundation of who we are. And I think that, we are not, veteran is part of our tribe and that's a part of who we are, but that doesn't define who we are, right? And so I think that, when I identified myself as a coach, I think that also bled over to who I wanted to be as a father, right? Because I am playing to my strengths as a father, because I love to coach my kids, am I always good at it? No, but I think that's my strength, and that's kind of my value proposition as a human being. So if I could play to that strength, both personally and professionally, then I know I can make a difference.
You hit on something that I don't know if I've ever hit on before, or I hit it on this particular way. I maybe hinted at it, that veterans often, there's a lot of veterans that join because they don't know who they are, and they like the idea of adopting an identity that's assigned to them. And the same thing can apply to sports, because a lot of people chase that scholarship, chase that professional, because they feel it's the only path. Maybe they came from a really broken home and they feel like this is the only way to feel value or feel loved. Maybe you came from a loveless home, and the love of the fans is something that fuels you and drives you. And both of those are defined by the uniform you put on. And I've talked to a military spouse whose husband killed himself because the Marine Corps medically discharged him and took the uniform off against his will. And he joined essentially to gain that identity. And the Marines have one of the most indoctrinated identities. It never actually leaves you. So like, if you really only know that. And the reason why I asked about your transition when you joined is we really never acknowledge, as we get out, the transition of when we got in. We had goals, we had ambitions. We don't understand, we don't acknowledge the gaps of where we thought we were. Kind of like do a SWOT analysis of What am I on the out? What was I really looking for when I went in? Did I find it? Did I find what I was looking for when I went in? Maybe I need to make a pivot, kind of going back to, did that get me a result that I wanted? If it didn't, okay, maybe we need to try something different. But that first transition is when no one acknowledges. And it's when you put that uniform on, it's so important because you were someone before. Even if you didn't acknowledge it, or even if you couldn't love what was there, I bet other people could easily identify what that was. And that is something that is so important. And I can also pick up the way you've described all the different things that you've got going on. Is one thing that really helps in the second transition is the amount of opportunity that you have. And what can scare the hell out of you is when you feel like you're going into a desert. I think there's a lot of veterans out there that feel like they're standing in an oasis where there is a nice bubbling spring of water in the middle. There's plenty of animals surrounding you to feed off of that provide all of the different things that you need to survive. Because when I was a Lance Corporal, I could blow every single dollar and 3 squares a day and a roof over my head and still have a job. And that oasis is a very nice warm fuzzy. And if you don't do any planning, you can feel like you are standing on the edge of an oasis walking into a desert. And what I think you did perfectly there is you essentially understood that your network is something that's going to create opportunity. And I have a part of my friendship course that I launched at freedadcourse.com was the idea that the amount of opportunity you have in your life is directly proportional to the amount of people you talk to daily. And that's not something people acknowledge, or veterans suck at, because we don't know how to talk to people. It's something we're scared of because they might find some secret inside our head. And so I commend you just for, maybe you did it consciously or not unconsciously, but I can tell that that's something that made you a more resilient person. Because if you feel like your life has options, you feel like you have choices. And I think if you feel like you have choices, you're not trapped into a corner. And if you don't have choices, you feel like you're trapped in a corner. And that's when you bite. Like when an animal is backed into a corner, that's when they attack. And you often will hurt them people that you're close to.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, that's actually, that's the fight, flight, or freeze response. It's, when your automatic nervous system kicks in, it's part of our DNA code. So how to respond to stress. Stress isn't good or bad either, by the way. I mean, it just is. I mean, your response, can be in kind. Too much bad stress can be bad. Too much good stress can be good as well too. And I think that definitely relates to me now. And it's scary as hell, man. I go in transition in itself is difficult. Let alone to do it. When you get a family to feed, you got 4 or 5 people who are depending on you. And then you're in a global pandemic and you don't know economically, we don't know where this is going to go. Right. So seems like all great that I got these opportunities, but I don't know where the hell it's going to go. I can't control any of that too. So I think you made a great point about like, hey, create as many opportunities as I can that align with my passion and my purpose and what I think I want to do. And, and if some of those opportunities, some of those oases are mirages, they draw, then I can land on my feet, and to at least survive, maintain our quality of life, and then pivot, because I think, and I'm not afraid to pivot. I think that's a really important thing for everybody to understand is that you have to, that's part of the design process is rapidly prototyping, beta testing, learning and figuring it out. And if you fight the plan or you're married to the plan, you're increasing the chances that you're gonna fail, I think. And so I'm not afraid to have to pivot. And I'm actually looking forward to having multiple opportunities to make that pivot.
You hit on one good point that I want to make sure that we can highlight, because if you were listening closely to the bio, there were several people in your life that were kind of like a thing on a ping pong table where you hit it and you ricocheted into a new direction. They literally put you on a new path. That's what happens when you have conversations with friends or conversations with new people. Because, even if you're a dad listening to this and you're liking the conversation, but you still feel empty, maybe you have no idea what your value proposition is to even continue and take another breath. And you're at that pit that you need someone to reach in and grab you and help pull you out. One of the best and most powerful parts of a friendship is they reflect back your best components. They will reflect back your next step that you need to take. And if you stand in a mirrorless room, you will never see where that next step is. But so many times that one person will step in, they'll reflect something that you can't see. And that reflection will completely change your life forever. And coming back to West Point, like that's full circle reflection. That person was reflecting back a strength that you couldn't see and created opportunity you didn't even know existed, and that now has changed your life.
Yeah, and that there's a term for that process. It's called mastery. And so that's where, the biblical adage about iron shaping iron, one man makes another. I mean, that process of mastery is really what it's about. And it's a deliberate and an intentional process. It doesn't happen by accident, but you have to take the first step, like you said, by being a friend and seeking friendship, and I think that's, that's creating the opportunity for mastery to really happen.
Is that something, I don't know the answer to this question, so I may be curious, is that something professional athletes suffer, that they kind of internalize and they don't create friends? They kind of just become an idol versus someone that actually values human life as a connection?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, especially at the professional level, you'd be shocked that, I worked with a lot with the NFL, and I was shocked. Like one of the first clients that I worked with on the consulting side with professional sports, the New York Jets. And there was a guy who, we were talking about getting to know your teammates, and, you'd be surprised at the number of people that didn't really know their teammates. And I think that, that's a shame, because they have their professional life, they spend their time in their locker room, they do their craft, but then the social and task cohesion, the social cohesion, the task cohesion is there, but the social cohesion is not there beyond their time in the locker room, right? They when we did a poll of a group of players with the Jets, and it was you would, I won't give you the numbers, but it's you would laugh at the fraction of players who actually really knew more and details about their players than probably than what you would know about a stranger that you've never played a game with, let alone an entire season for 5 years. So it really shifted a paradigm in my mind about how little these players know each other. And same thing when I spent a lot of time with the Seattle Mariners, and they were were really seeking to lean into that, especially with their team captains, guys, I won't name it by name, but that are going to be first ballot Hall of Famers who, we're trying to figure out, we take it for granted, our leadership training in the military, but the things that you and I would, are like breathing air and drinking water were not inherent to them, as far as how do you build this camaraderie in a clubhouse that extends beyond the clubhouse, right? Because that's when people come together to start working towards a common purpose. And so I think athletes struggle with that a lot, and it's especially when they leave their sport, and they struggle mightily because athletes don't have the resources we have as veterans. I mean, there are over 500 veteran service organizations that are out there. There's a name for it. It's called the Sea of Goodwill. And there's not even nearly a fraction of those for athletes. So when I see those tribes coming together through organizations like Emerging Veterans of Players, it really makes me happy, because these are people who are going through transitions that can lean on each other in that tribal community through things that we're good at as dudes. Like, hey, let's go roll and do some MMA together, and let's sit down and let's have some discussions, because we're all going through this crap together. Transitions aren't unique to veterans, but if we create an opportunity to make those connections, then good things are going to happen.
You just hit it right out of the park, to use a baseball terminology there, as our sports conversation continues. And I never visualized this comparison, but I want to, because you probably might enjoy it as well, that there's often a scene in a lot of movies when they protect military members in war, and they'll always be showing a picture of their kids to their other soldiers, Marines, whatever it may be, airmen, of when they're gone, like who's they're waiting for, whether it be their wife, their family. They're always sharing common pictures. And the unit cohesion that creates of, if I see that guy in trouble, his wife isn't going to get to hug him when he gets to go home. I'm going to have his 6. And if you don't have that kind of connection that they know their kids' names kind of, I can imagine that equally translates to the amount of Super Bowl rings they have, because that cohesion on the field, that's exactly what you're trying to do when you're doing it. And money isn't the primary motivator, whether they tell you it is or not. It's trying to achieve an objective that we can all go back home to our families without a concussioner, for example. That feeling is something that moved mountains. And I think, I don't know this perfectly, but I'm pretty sure this is part of the science and why Patriots have become such a dynasty, because of that cohesive family that coach brought to it. I don't know how many of them know each other's names, but they probably do very well, because they fight for each other on a level that I don't think a lot of teams do. And you're talking to the very crutch of what men need in their life. For millennia, we survived in a tribe where it was never on us to do all of the work. There was always someone else to teach us how to hunt. There was always someone older. There was always someone younger. We always had these rite of passages, and we always had someone to share the load with. If life got too heavy, we would just get more people around us to lift up together. And without that, there's almost a certainty that life will give you more than you can handle. And I would say the more you make, probably as far as money, the more that weight feels even. And having a team that can feel it with you and lift it, like that is so powerful on every aspect of what it means to be a dad. Because there's kind of a joke in the Marine Corps. I don't know if I created it or if it's a running joke, but in the Marine Corps, your back is the first thing they abuse. And it's not, if you want to lift something, you don't get a fork truck. That's a stupid idea. It just means you need more Marines lifting it. Like if I had $1 for every time I lifted something with like 15 Marines around instead of getting a freaking fork truck. And there's a lot of life lesson in there that if you can't lift something, that just means you need more people around you to lift it. And it's a certainty that life will give you more than you're able to handle. And we don't honor that basic part of our core DNA that says we are a tribal species. We thrive when we are around people, and we thrive when we're working together as a cohesive unit with a common goal. And it sounds like you can see it now once it's kind of, we paint it in this particular way within sports, that it's what's going on in the off season. Are you guys playing with each other? Are the kids hanging out? Like all of that connection happens before the first football is even thrown.
Yeah. And I'll give you an example of that. I mean, what's great is that, in Major League Baseball, when you don't have a season, you started to get the Zoom thing going, just like everybody's doing everywhere, and you would think that baseball, like when the season ends, guys are split into the wins. I mean, they're all over Central and South America. They're all over the United States. And so how do you stay connected, right? And how do you stay connected in the global pandemic? And, when we have these Zoom calls, it's a very deliberate, intentional thing that the first thing that we talk about is not about baseball. It's not about the 5 tools and fundamentals. We're talking about how are you doing? How's your family doing? And we're bringing the kids in, and we're talking about, it's something that's going on with their family. And that's the things that endear us to each other, right? And so I think that has led to, a really beautiful thing as far as getting in terms of cohesion that can happen even in an era of social distancing or physical distancing. You can still socially grow as a tribe and as a team, whether it's fatherhood, baseball, serving in the military. Even in time physical distancing, you can grow socially. But I think it starts with giving a shit about another human being and then taking that step to say, how you doing?
I love that kind of summary there because it sums up everything that we were talking about there. I do have one last question I want to hint toward to see if what your take is. I've heard sports people or professional sports players will use something that's called like the alter ego effect, where they kind of create a virtual persona they step into. I imagine psychology wise, you've studied this. Is there something we can take away that and apply it to us as a dad?
Yeah, I think that it comes into just knowing who you are and what you're all about, is what we talked about. I think, who you are when you put the uniform on, whether you're a service member or a ball player, there really is the same person. And I used to get caught up in this too. It goes back to the identity piece. Like I'm Colonel Riise when I put my uniform on, and I got to be this professional military officer, and stuff like that too. And then that's a different guy than Andy Riise, the father and the husband. And I did that for a while, and that's freaking all wrong. I am the same person when I'm wearing, whether I'm wearing the uniform or I'm taking it off, if I know who I am, because my values should be the same. My 3 values that I figured out, and I hope you guys, if you guys want to know what your core values, go to the VIA Institute Character. It's a great tool. It'll spit out your core values are. If you haven't done that, you should do that. Who you are as a person, specifically as a father. And I figured out my 3 core values are love, competition and service. Everything that I do and I don't do, and on all the hats that I wear and all the uniforms that I have worn and, have to do with those 3 fundamental things. And those don't change, so I don't think it's an alter ego. I think you do hear about that. I think there is a psychology to that in terms of how you see yourself as a competitor, perhaps. But I think that there's some core fundamental things that you have to really take some time to unpack and really embrace, because those should be universal constructs across the board in all the roles and responsibilities you have, no more important than a dad.
Yeah, I like to flip it. It's not about work-life or work-life balance. Like it's not an or statement of this time you're an employee, this time you're a dad. It's work-life integration and dad life integration. As I try to build my business and try to be a stay-at-home dad, a husband, a father to 3 kids, a person trying to do COVID just like everybody else. It's how do I keep integrating more in my life so that I get more of what I desire versus having to choose to be an 8 to 5 person and then come home and be dad. Like I'm on the goal of how do I get to be dad all day, every day, and get to love that while at the same time pursuing happiness and pursuing my goals.
That's right. He's the same guy. I mean, I think from a business perspective, sometimes you hear like, hey, don't take it personal, it's business. Well, that's a bullshit statement because if you're doing it right, you know, and you're going all in on your business, it's personal. It's emotional because you poured yourself into that project, to that pitch, to that sale. And don't tell anybody who's lost their job right now that, you know, business ain't personal because it affects you personally, right? And so I think, you know, I love the integration piece too. I don't like even the this versus that because I think they're one and another the same, right?
And I love what you said there about being personal because I had when I lost my position, it was eliminated and they just reorged the structure. And just like that, 8 years of service. And if it wasn't for this podcast, I would have taken it more personal. But this podcast, because I had a vehicle to kind of keep growing with, it was just kind of a closure of a chapter versus kind of an closing of a book that I had to forcefully say goodbye to. Like to me, it was just close this chapter and focus on writing the rest of the chapter.
Yeah, and that's you're spot on because that's exactly how I feel about my military career. You know, I'm sure I will miss the people. That's a very common theme, and you know, but I will not miss the Army. You know, I mean, because the Army as an institution will not miss me, nor is it designed to do that. You know, but like as long as I am sticking to who I am as a coach and continue to coach, you know, based on all the coaching that I've done in the military, I know that you know, I'll still have that same satisfaction that I've had outside of the military, and I'm gonna screw it up. I'm freaking, but I'm not afraid to screw it up because that's how you grow and get better.
And in my farewell email to the company, I wrote that over my 8 years, because our headquarters was in Prague, so I had friends literally I still have friends all over the country, all over the world. And I wrote that like through my 8 years, I was never creating coworkers or I was never connecting with the coworker. I was creating friends. And in my early days, I remember telling a friend over in Prague, like I have more Czech friends than I do American friends because I felt easier connected to them over there. And like, it was always about friendships for me. Like the hardest part of leaving wasn't saying goodbye to a job that paid me money. It was saying goodbye to all the relationships at the time. And it wasn't a goodbye, but it was a kind of an ending to like, they're not going to be as on as they normally are. But it was the actual closure of the friendships because that was always the core. Every time I show up, even as someone calls me on the phone, my philosophy is I always try to be the friend that I wish I had in my life 5 years ago. And that's always the basic foundation. Like it's never about business. It's about how can I be the best friend to you? Because 5 years ago, I would have loved having a friend like myself show up in your world and just kind of remind you that you are a great human being, a great dad, and to get you more excited about tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, and that, again, it goes back to tribe and investing in people and process, man, like we've been talking about. It's, you know, that doesn't have to end, you know, just because you take the uniform off, right? You know, as a matter of fact, you need it more when you take the uniform off. You need it more than ever, right?
Because it happens in the military, whether you choose to happen or not. It's actually assigned to you as
you're forced.
You're forced in a cohesive unit. But on the outside, you either have it or you don't, and you have to create it and you have to work at it daily.
Yeah, for sure. No, for sure. And I think that what's great about where we are, and I think that's really you know, I think all challenges and opportunities in disguise. I think the great thing about if you weren't familiar with how technology can bring people together, you know, I hope that's what the new normal is that if you weren't accustomed to or familiar with, because you were forced out of the comfort zone, you've realized what technology to do to kind of bring people together in meaningful ways. And, I think maybe the challenge is like, hey, you know, if there's somebody you serve with that you wonder where the hell they are and you're a Facebook friend or LinkedIn or freaking you're on Twitter, Instagram, whatever, why don't you set up a time to talk to them, you know, have a virtual happy hour. That's been a really fun thing that I've done. I think even in the weeks when the last freaking thing I want to do, I'm zoomed out is have another Zoom call, man. I just have had a blast doing the virtual happy hours. I highly recommend that if you haven't done one yet.
My wife's having a few teacher friends over tonight, and she was thinking or telling me like, I feel guilty that you don't do any of this. And I was like, well, I mean, I have friends here locally that I could, but honestly, I get it scratched daily because I'm having probably 3 or 4 Zoom calls with someone a day, and that feeds my curiosity. It feeds my need for connection. I do wish I could have a physical connection or have a beer with someone, but at the same time, like I take what I can, but like I haven't been in isolation because every day I'm talking to a dad, or I'm interviewing, or I'm just having a connection with someone, or helping someone through it, or even just having any conversation, joining someone else's Zoom call or virtual like that. Like, just, you can do it in the very simplest ways. Your brain just convinces to make it super complicated. So Andy, as we wrap up this interview, I've absolutely loved it because we went in a place that I wasn't expecting to with this interview, but we found some very good comparisons. And I feel like many men understand the sports world. So I think that comparison will easily hack and untranslate the stuff that we have going on in our head today. So I have one last question. What's a parting piece of advice you want to leave for military dads? It's kind of like one of your best nuggets, something that you wish someone would have told you on day one that you could maybe gift us on other people's days, day one or day 350.
Yeah. I want everybody to remember out there as a dad that you are good enough. I want you to think about that for a second and remind yourself, self-talk is, in your inner narrative, is critical in terms of determining how you think, which then triggers how you feel, how you act, your physiology, and how you act and react. It creates this, this loop that can either help you or hurt you in terms of your performance as a father. And if you can remind yourself daily, that you are good enough, and that half of your success as a father is just showing up, is being present, and then improve that 1% of how you stay engaged. That's good. But you are good enough as a father by just showing up, and the 1% better, is your goal.
Mm-hmm. I love that, because that is something that I sucked at for a long time. And it's only in the last few months even. And through coronavirus, like, this is probably the most transformation that I've gone through. I now have a beard. I've lost 20 pounds, and I've really taken probably the biggest steps in my health that I've ever done in my entire life. So, like, as long as I don't die from coronavirus, this virus will have given me the freedom to really step into my best self and my best life. And it started with this idea that I needed to love the person looking back in the mirror. And as long as I didn't love that person, I was always going to have that inner narrative that you were talking about, that loop that would convince me of certain things that person needed to do because he looked weak and not strong enough to get through whatever life did. And like, now my journey is to make sure the outside matches the inside. And I can tell you, I already feel confident. I feel stronger. I look in the mirror and I can see a stronger Ben Kula looking back. And that's already led to being more confident in the daily decisions, or just the confidence to deal through an emotional storm with my kids. Like, I get less triggered because I can feel more genuine love on the inside for myself. And I use the Calm meditation app. And today there was a beautiful, she always gives a graphic at the end. And she said that no one in this universe deserves more love than the love for yourself. That if there is one person that deserves it, it's for yourself. And just remember that it's not wrong. It's not selfish. It's selfless. And when you can fully love yourself, then you can give it freely to others. And it's not something you give under condition. It's not something, it's that unconditional love that everybody talks about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think the last party shot would be, hey, fatherhood, just like leadership and coaching, it doesn't start with you. It's not about you, but it starts with you. So fatherhood isn't about you, but it starts with you, and you're good enough.
Yes. Saving yourself will save others. Well, Andy, if people want to connect with you and learn more about what you're up to, where's the best place to check you out?
Yeah, please. I'm on LinkedIn. Find me at Andy Riise, and then we'll post that hopefully on the show notes here. And then you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Twitter, I use the hashtags Coaching Matters. You can also find me at the Texas A&M Coaching Academy. You can Google search that. If you're a veteran out there, you're interested in getting into athletic coaching, administration, or teaching, and you want to get educated and certified in that too, be on the lookout for that. We're going to be launching in the summer of 2021. We'll have online courses. We'll have resident programs there. So you do it on campus or online. It's a great resource for veterans who are out there who want to get into coaching. And then, just to reach out to me, stay in touch. I like to just be a relevant, responsive resource, and no more important than to veterans and to dads.
Well, I absolutely love that. And I'll make sure all of those links are down in the show notes. I'm definitely even going to check a few of them out myself. So If you want to check those out and your curiosity is piqued, go down there in the show notes and check that out. And if you want to check out that free course that I mentioned of how to create more friendships in your life, head over to freedadcourse.com. It's 5 free audio lessons, 10 minutes each. It's super simple. You can listen to them on a simple walk, and those 5 simple steps will help create more opportunity, and that opportunity will change your life. Andy, thank you for this conversation. I appreciate you, and I'm positive our friendship is just beginning, but it's going to great places.
Yeah, likewise, Ben. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for taking the time to check out that episode, because if you liked that episode as much as I did, I know that value hit home close to you as it hit home close to me. Those similarities were so impactful for me. Some of my big takeaways from this episode were recognizing the seasons of parenting that we talked about early in the beginning, that seasons of parenting, that whatever feeling we feel right now is not something that's permanent. That was something that I struggled with when my kids were younger, and I'm glad we brought that topic up. Growth mindset versus fixed mindset. There are so many people that don't have that mindset or even those words to use to describe their thought patterns. If you were one of those dads that never heard that before, I hope those words helped open up a whole new world, because this is what we're talking about when I say that life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you, and that everything that is coming into your life is an opportunity to grow from it. And if you keep that mindset there, your mind will grow and everything that comes to you will keep getting stronger. Trying to do too much in life, saying yes to too many things. Man, if that advice doesn't hit you hard in 2020, so much of 2020 was about slowing down with COVID. And before that, we were always saying yes, one more thing, just adding it on. We have to recognize as dads that we need to slow down. It takes a village. Recognizing that you can't just do it alone. Like, there are so many people that it takes to raise a child, and you have to rely on all those different support networks to be able to do it successfully. And telling yourself that you can do it alone is just a recipe for disaster. And even if you somehow do pull it off, you're not going to get the results that you were aiming for, because you need that experience. You need that person to share the load with. Comparing yourself to yesterday, that was something that I've heard before, but I often forget how valuable that advice is, because so much of the comparison trap is that it's comparing yourself to someone's yesterday, to someone's future, someone's ending, to your beginning. And we only need to compare, are we better than we were yesterday? That is that 1% mindset that we really, truly need. Losing your identity. So much of what professional sports and veterans face is the identity crisis that we have to go to. How do we redefine who we are? And remembering that when our first transition joined, that was when we joined the military. That is so important. It's something I talk about a lot when I go on other podcasts, because to me, you have to know who you are in the beginning to really understand who you are in the end, and then really figure out where you want to go going further. I really hope you love this episode. I really hope that you get a chance to check out freedadcourse.com. Those friendship courses there, I've already got some feedback that those dads that are listening to that course are loving what they're hearing, and they're already applying it in simple ways, in ways that may not seem obvious with COVID, but there are still opportunities every day to spark up a conversation, to create new friends, because those friendships help change my life. And I hope that this course at freedadcourse.com changes yours. And so with that, I'm going to sign off, and I will talk to you guys again on Friday.